The night Chinedu was born, something strange happened in the village. The sky suddenly grew dark. Heavy winds began to blow across the old mud houses, and thunder echoed loudly through the night as if the heavens themselves were angry. Inside a small village hut, lit only by a weak lantern flame, a young woman cried in pain while fighting to bring life into the world. That woman was Mama Ada, poor, exhausted, but hopeful. And after hours of pain and tears, the cry of a baby finally filled the room. But instead of joy, fear entered the house. The child's father, Chief Okafor, stared at the newborn with cold eyes. No smile, no happiness, no celebration. The villagers outside whispered quietly among themselves, because in their village, people believed children born during storms carried strange destinies. Some called it a bad sign. Others called it a warning. But nobody knew the truth. Nobody knew that the tiny child, wrapped in old cloth that night, would grow into the very man who would one day shake the entire village. His name was Chinedu. And from the very first moment he opened his eyes, the world had already decided to hate him. As the years passed, Chinedu quickly learned something painful. Not every child grows up surrounded by love. While other children played freely in the village, Chinedu walked alone. People avoided him. Mothers warned their children not to stay too close to him. Some villagers believed he carried bad luck. Others simply hated him because his own father treated him like a disgrace. Every morning, he walked through dusty village roads, hearing insults from children who laughed at his torn clothes and weak appearance. They called him names. They mocked his silence. They reminded him every single day that he did not belong. But the deepest wound did not come from the village. It came from his own home. Chief Okafor never treated Chinedu like a son. He barely looked at him. Sometimes days passed without the man speaking a single kind word to the boy. Chinedu would often sit outside alone at sunset, watching other families laugh together while wondering why his own life felt so empty. Deep inside his heart, he carried one painful question. Why does everybody hate me? But despite the rejection, despite the insults, despite the loneliness, something inside Chinedu refused to break. Something inside him kept whispering that his story was not over. In a world filled with rejection, only one person truly saw Chinedu for who he was. His mother, Mama Ada, was poor, tired, and constantly burdened by suffering. But whenever she looked at her son, she did not see a curse. She saw purpose. Every night after the village went silent, she would sit beside him inside their small mud house and comfort him while tears quietly filled his eyes. She knew the pain he carried. She saw the sadness hidden behind his silence. She knew her son was slowly growing up, believing he was unwanted. So she became his strength. When the villagers mocked him, she encouraged him. When his father ignored him, she held him close. When hunger entered their house, she sacrificed her own food just to make sure he could eat. Sometimes, late at night, Chinedu would wake up and see his mother praying quietly while everyone else slept. She prayed for protection. She prayed for peace. And most importantly, she prayed that one day her son would discover who he truly was. Because deep down, Mama Ada knew something nobody else understood. Chinedu was not born to remain in that village forever. Greatness was waiting for him somewhere beyond the pain. But before that greatness could come, suffering would first shape him into the man he was meant to become. One cold night, Chinedu's life changed forever. The village was quiet. The moon hung weakly above the rooftops, while a dry wind moved slowly through the trees. Unable to sleep, Chinedu walked outside after hearing angry voices coming from his father's room. At first, he tried to ignore it, but something about the anger in Chief Okafor's voice pulled him closer. Slowly, carefully, the young boy moved toward the wooden wall and listened. What he heard next shattered his heart completely. His own father spoke about him with hatred so deep it felt like poison. Not disappointment, not frustration. Hatred. The kind of hatred no child should ever hear from a parent. In that moment, Chinedu felt his chest tighten with pain. Tears filled his eyes, but he remained silent. Because sometimes the most painful wounds are not physical. Sometimes words destroy people more than violence ever could. That night, something changed inside Chinedu. The innocent child who still hoped for his father's love slowly disappeared. And in his place, a different person began to grow. A person shaped by pain. A person shaped by rejection. A person who would one day return stronger than anyone imagined. Not long after that painful night, tragedy entered Chinedu's life once again. Mama Ada suddenly became very sick. At first, people thought it was an ordinary illness, but as the days passed, her condition became worse. She grew weaker. Her voice became softer. Even standing up became difficult. Chinedu watched helplessly as the only person who truly loved him slowly faded away before his eyes. Day and night, he stayed beside her, hoping, praying, refusing to believe she might leave him forever. But deep down, fear already lived in his heart. Then one evening, as rain fell quietly outside their small house, Mama Ada held her son's hand tightly and looked into his eyes with fear. It was not the fear of death. It was the fear of leaving her son alone in a dangerous world. She tried to speak carefully between painful breaths. She wanted to tell him the truth, the secret she had hidden for years, a secret connected to his father, a secret connected to the village. But before she could explain everything, her strength began to disappear. And with tears rolling down his face, Chinedu realized the worst moment of his life had finally arrived. The only light in his world was dying. After the death of his mother, the village no longer felt like home to Chinedu. Every corner reminded him of pain. The empty mat where his mother used to sleep, the silent evenings without her voice, the coldness of his father who behaved as though nothing had happened. Chinedu felt completely alone, and slowly, the sadness inside him turned into determination. One early morning before sunrise, he packed his few belongings into a small worn-out bag and left the village quietly. No celebration, no goodbye. Nobody stopped him. As the old bus carried him toward Lagos, Chinedu stared through the dusty window, wondering if life would finally change. But Lagos was nothing like the dreams people described. The city was loud, fast, unforgiving. Thousands of people moved through the streets every day chasing survival, and very quickly Chinedu realized that Lagos had no pity for the weak. Hunger welcomed him before success ever did. Some nights he wandered the streets searching for food. Other nights he slept beside market stalls, with mosquitoes biting his skin while rainwater soaked his clothes. Yet even inside all that suffering, Chinedu refused to return to the village, because deep inside him a fire had started burning, a silent promise, a promise that one day the same people who rejected him would hear his name again. And when that day came, everything would change. Life in Lagos became harder than Chinedu ever imagined. Every day felt like a battle. A battle against hunger. A battle against exhaustion. A battle against hopelessness. He searched endlessly for work, moving from one street to another while the city swallowed his strength little by little. Some people ignored him completely. Others insulted him because of his appearance. There were days he worked from morning until night, only to receive almost nothing in return. Eventually, Chinedu found shelter inside a small mechanic workshop where he slept beside broken engines and rusty tools. The smell of oil filled the air every night. Mosquitoes buzzed endlessly around him, while rain leaked through parts of the roof. Yet even in those terrible conditions, Chinedu continued fighting for survival. Sometimes, he watched wealthy people drive past in expensive cars and wondered if life would ever become different for someone like him. There were moments he almost gave up. Moments he nearly accepted defeat. Some boys around him joined dangerous gangs and internet fraud just to escape poverty. They mocked Chinedu for trying to remain honest. They called him foolish for believing hard work could change his future. But Chinedu remembered his mother's words. And every time life pushed him toward darkness, he resisted. Because despite all the suffering surrounding him, a small part of him still believed destiny had not forgotten his name. Then, one rainy evening, fate finally stepped into Chinedu's life. The sky over Lagos was dark and heavy with rain. Cars moved slowly through flooded roads, while tired workers rushed home before the storm became worse. Chinedu had just finished another long day at the mechanic workshop when he heard a loud crash nearby. People screamed. Vehicles stopped suddenly. Without thinking, he ran toward the scene. Stopped suddenly. Without thinking, he ran toward the scene. A luxury car had lost control and crashed badly near the roadside. Smoke filled the air while frightened bystanders stood at a distance too afraid to help. But Chinedu moved forward immediately. Inside the damaged vehicle was an elderly, wealthy man struggling to breathe. Despite the danger, Chinedu forced the door open and pulled the injured man to safety moments before flames began rising from the engine. Rain poured heavily around them, while the old man stared at Chinedu with shock and gratitude. In that moment, something strange happened. The old man looked into Chinedu's eyes as though he recognized something familiar. Not his face, not his voice, something deeper. For the first time in many years, someone looked at Chinedu with respect instead of rejection. And neither of them knew it yet. But that rainy night would completely transform both of their lives forever. After the accident, Chinedu's life began to change slowly. The wealthy old man he rescued was deeply moved by his honesty and courage. In a city filled with selfishness and greed, Chinedu had risked his own life to save a stranger expecting nothing in return. That kind of character was rare. So the old man decided to help him. At first, Chinedu could hardly believe it. For so many years, life had only shown him suffering. But now, opportunities slowly began opening before him. He learned business. He worked tirelessly. He studied every lesson carefully and pushed himself harder than everyone around him. While others slept, Chinedu stayed awake planning his future. The same determination that helped him survive poverty now pushed him toward success. Months turned into years. The poor village boy who once slept beside broken engines slowly transformed into a respected businessman. Expensive suits replaced torn clothes. Luxury offices replaced mechanic workshops. Powerful people began speaking his name with admiration. But despite the money, despite the success, Chinedu never forgot where he came from. Some nights, he still remembered the dusty roads of his village. He remembered the insults. He remembered his mother's tears. And deep inside him, one painful question remained unanswered. What secret was his mother trying to reveal before she died? That question haunted him constantly, and eventually, it pulled him back toward the village he once escaped. 20 years after leaving the village, Chinedu finally returned home. But he did not return as the weak boy people once mocked. He returned as a powerful man. As his black luxury SUV moved slowly along the dusty village road, people stopped what they were doing and stared in disbelief. Children ran behind the vehicle curiously, while elders whispered among themselves, trying to understand who the wealthy stranger was. Nobody recognized him at first. The quiet child that they once insulted was now dressed in expensive clothes, surrounded by confidence and power. The village that once rejected him now watched him with respect. And when the truth finally spread that the rich man stepping out of the SUV was Chinedu, shock covered the entire community. Some people became afraid. Others suddenly pretended they had always cared about him. Even Chief Okafor could barely believe his eyes. The son he once called cursed had become more successful than every man in the village. But Chinedu did not return for celebration. He did not return to show off wealth. He returned for something far more important: the truth. The secret connected to his mother's death still haunted him after all these years. And deep down, Chinedu knew somebody in that village was hiding something terrible, something dark, something dangerous. And this time, he was finally strong enough to uncover it.